Greetings, saints of the Most High. Welcome to another installment of the Messianic Torah Observer. Rod Thomas coming to you on a sweltering evening here in the DFW. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to fellowship with me on this blessed day of rest in Yehoshua Messiah. And as always, beloved, it is my hope, trust, and prayer that this installment of TMTO finds you, your families, and your fellowships well and blessed. As I am publishing this discussion, it is the 23rd day of the third month of 6025, which translates to June 20th, 2025. This is Messianic Reflections in the Life of Yosef ben Yisrael. In English, this is Messianic Reflections in the Life of Joseph, son of Israel. And this will be my thoughts and reflections on Torah reading 34, which is contained in Genesis chapter 37, verses 1 through 36. Now, I do have a great amount of content to discuss with you related to our reading today. So, for the sake of time, please follow as you are led using your own Bible. But I will not be reading the actual 36 verses of our parasha. I will just only be giving commentary on each verse or passage. So let's begin our reading today with verse 1 of chapter 37. We're in the book of Genesis, or Bereshit, chapter 37, verse 1. And we find here, written out by Moshe, or Moses, Jacob, settles or inhabits the land of the sojourning of his father in Canaan. Now, recall in reading 33 last week, we addressed the concept of the patriarchs of our beloved faith sojourning or temporarily dwelling in the very land that Jehovah promised them in the covenant he cut with them. The writer of the book of Hebrews notes this reality. Hebrews chapter 11. And the Legacy Standard Bible reads at verse 8, by faith Abraham, when he was called, obeyed by going out to a place which he was to receive for an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. Verse 9, by faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, fellow heirs of the same promise. Verse 10, for he was looking for, and here's the kicker, he was looking for the city which has foundations, whose architect and builder is Jehovah, God, Elohim. The third patriarch, Jacob, finally settles in back home, where he was always covenanted to be, in Canaan, in specifically Hebron, the home of his father Isaac, or Yitzhak. Now, of the three patriarchs, Isaac, Yitzhak, was the only one to have never left Hebron. Moving on to verse 2. Scholars refer to the phrase, these are the generations. Specifically for our reading, these are the generations of Jacob, or Jacob. And this phrase, these are the generations, is referred to Toledot. And the wording generally used in the Hebrew scriptures here is to alert the reader that what precedes or what proceeds it is a generational listing. But in this case, Jacob's so-called generations have shifted into the purview or storyline of his beloved son, Yosef or Joseph. For Joseph's story is Yisrael's or Yasharel's saving grace through the will and plans of Jehovah. Yosef would be the vessel by which Yah's covenant with the patriarchs Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob would continue in perpetuity. You see, Yosef preserves Yisrael. Despite being rejected, persecuted, maligned, assaulted, and sold into slavery by Yisrael, the sons of Yisrael. He is, as we shall soon discuss, a type of Yehoshua HaMashiach, Yeshua Messiah. Now, it should be noted that the remaining chapters of Genesis, or the book of Bereshit, chronicles Jacob's life, Yaakov's life, through the life of his son, Joseph, or Yosef. Arnold G. Fruchtenbaum writes in his commentary, Ariel's Bible commentary, quote, "The story of Joseph completes the story of Jacob." So we begin the story of Joseph, Yaakov's son of 17 years, shepherding the family's flocks, their sheep and goats, along with his brothers, or so it would seem from most of our English translations. Now, Jewish tradition holds that Joseph's age of 17 would have put him at the age common for marriage in those days. This then hints at, according to Moshe's narrative here, Yosef assuming the role of the son of the covenant. Now, no other son of Jacob, at this juncture of Hebrew history, seemed to have the unique character to assume the son of the covenant role, which is not saying a lot since Yah does the choosing who the succeeding sons of the covenant are to be. But we will see evidence that Yosef ideally became the son of the covenant by the various Jehovah-ordained events that peppered his young life. For example, in his dreams, him being the beloved of his daddy Yaakov, his ascendancy to Egyptian rulership, and so much more. His wisdom, his godly wisdom, it's an amazing story in parallel. Not only will Yosef, through the wisdom gifted to him by Jehovah, save Yisrael, save Yasharel, but most of the nations in the Sinai Peninsula. The Hebrew term tended, such as tending the flock, as used here in this verse, is ro'et, which also suggests Yosef shepherded his brothers. Interesting, huh? And it would make sense in the context of this story, the broader context of this story, that Yosef would be tending his brother. And we'll see a little bit more of that as we continue along the storyline. Now, the text denotes that Yosef was a helper of the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, which the JPS Torah commentary explains as Yosef primarily fraternized with Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. It should be noted that Reuben, despite being complicit in his brother Yosef's impending enslavement, saves Yosef's life and unconsciously cooperates with Jehovah's purpose regarding Yosef and ultimately the nation of Yisrael. Furthermore, it should be noted, the question at this juncture of Moshe's chronology is, who of Yaakov, who of Jacob's sons will receive the birthright from Jacob or Yaakov? And who will become the son of the covenant? Two realities weigh upon this determination here. One being Reuben, Yaakov's oldest son, and by familial and patriarchal tradition, the son who would be in line to receive the birthright and become the son of the covenant. Well, he violates his father Yaakov's marital bed by engaging in sexual relations with Yaakov's concubine, Bilhah. And secondly, Jacob adored Yosef above all his sons. Yosef reports to his father Yaakov that his brothers were up to no good. And this becomes the first of at least 3 incidents that would put Yosef at extreme enmity with his brothers. That which Yosef's brothers had gotten themselves into that was of such ill repute is not mentioned in the text. In essence, Yosef was the family tattler, which, given that the tattle he reported to his father was true, well, it would not make Yosef evil. He was only doing what his father sent him to do, bring word of what they were up to, his brothers were up to. Moving on to verse 3. The love Yaakov has for, and that he displays towards Yosef, does not work in Yosef's favor as it relates to his relationship with his brothers. Moshe declares the reason Yaakov, or Jacob, adored Yosef above all of his sons was that Yosef was a son of his old age. Despite Benjamin being younger than Yosef, Yosef was Yaakov's true love, as though he were his firstborn son. Thus, Yosef was special to Yaakov in this sense. Arnold Fruchtenbaum suggests it is Yosef's firstborn sonship to Rachel that, in Yaakov's mind at least, makes him Yaakov's firstborn, worthy to receive the birthright. As a token of Yaakov's love for Yosef, Yaakov makes his beloved son a robe with long sleeves, a ketonet pasim. E.A. Spicer, in his book Genesis, Introduction, Translation, and Notes, describes Yosef's long-sleeved garment or robe as, quote, an ornamented tunic, end quote. Conversely, Nahum M. Sarna, in his article in the JPS Torah commentary, suggests that the meaning of ketonet pasim is unclear, but the Septuagint, that being the Greek translation of the Old Testament, and the Latin Vulgate render ketonet pasim as, quote, a robe of many colors, end quote. No doubt connecting this garment in type to the distinctive vesture worn by the virgin daughters of Hebrew royalty, as recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 13, verses 18 and 19. Turns out that certain ancient pieces of Egyptian and Syrian art depict what appears to be Hebrew figures attired in elaborately designed, multicolored robes, which seems to support Yosef's ketonet pasim being an elongated, technicolored robe or tunic, technicolored robe or dream coat, to borrow from the title of a popular 1980s Broadway play entitled Joseph and the Amazing Technicolored Dreamcoat. Thus, this robe Yosef receives from his father would have been a glaring indication of such firstborn or royal treatment to or before the eyes of his brothers. Which sort of begs the question, was this a visual notice that Yosef was to be Reuben's replacement? Was he taking on the firstborn responsibility for the family? Would he receive the covenant promises? Would he receive the birthright? Was Yosef's ketonet pasim a brutal, in-your-face response to Reuben's transgressions? Was this in line with an ancient Near Eastern practice, maybe, of Yosef being appointed by Yaakov as his clan's future leader? All these questions swirl around this technicolor dreamcoat. Regardless of the specific nuances at play here, the loudness of Yosef's technicolor dreamcoat would have been a constant reminder and source of anger, hatred, and jealousy for his brothers to draw from. Going to verse 4. Here, Moshe hangs this hatred, this anger, this jealousy that the brethren have towards their younger brother on the fact that their father, Yaakov, loves Yosef more than he loves them. Consequently, the brothers share no harmonious relationship with Yosef, according to the text. So what this verse is saying to us is that every attempt by Yosef to socialize with his brethren is rejected by them. And that's how much Yosef's brothers despise him. What a terrible situation for any of them to have lived in. The brethren's rejection of Yosef was, in effect, a rejection of Yaakov, of Jacob, their father, and also a rejection of Jehovah, their father's sovereign. Yah does the juxtaposing, the setting up of the family dynamics. So their rejection of Joseph was a rejection of Jacob and a rejection of Jehovah. Indeed, Yeshua, our master, was rejected by most of Judah because he, like Yosef, was beloved of his father. Moving on to verses 5 and 6. After setting the base foundation for the brothers' disdain towards Yosef, that is, Yaakov, Jacob's overriding love for Yosef, particularly as displayed in the Ketonet Pashim, that technicolor dream coat Yaakov makes for him, Moshe reveals the straw that breaks the camel's back, so to speak, that will lead to the brothers physically accosting Yosef. Yosef dreams a dream, in Hebrew, halom, a prophetic dream, a dream whereby Jehovah reveals to Yosef an event that will occur sometime in the future. Yah's communication with Yosef is not direct, but is rendered in symbols. Dreams during those days were invariably viewed as divine communications with humanity. Thus, when Yosef recounts his dream to them, this first dream, the brethren take the dream and its meaning quite seriously. Thus, they do not discount, nor do they reject the dream. But as we will soon see, they instead reject Yosef's projected role in the dream. Yosef's brothers blame him for the dream because, well, they bitterly viewed him as being obnoxious, essentially full of himself. Moving on to verses 7 and 8. So in this first dream, yes, there is another dream coming, beloved, Yosef describes to his brethren the story of the sons of Jacob, of Yaakov, binding or bundling sheaves of grain amid a field. At some point, Joseph's bundle, his sheaf, stands itself up, or it raises above his brother's sheaves. And Joseph's tall standing sheaf, or bundle, remains standing as his brother's lesser bundles or sheaves gather round about or encircle his sheaf, and their sheaves, well, they bow down or they prostrate down before his sheaf. The brothers correctly interpret the dream as they, at some point in the future, submitting themselves and paying homage to the one they despise the most, Yosef. The brethren recognize the dream is telling them that someday Yosef will assume eminent authority and power over them, of which they would submit themselves to. And so Joseph's brethren respond to Joseph's telling of this dream with a simple, "Will you really or truly reign or rule over us?" Joseph's brethren clearly understood the symbolism of this dream, which, as Moshe describes, drives them to despise their brother Yosef even more. The very recitation of the dream by Yosef, Joseph's words, added fuel to the fire of the hate fest that his brothers have going on within them. And there is an increase of hostility towards Yosef. Yeshua's brethren, Judah, well, they hated him similarly because of the words, which were actually his father's words that he spoke to them. Going on to verse 9. After the brethren's question is posed to Yosef regarding his prophesied reign over them, Moshe takes us immediately into the beloved son's second dream recitation. This one is similar to the first, but this, instead of agriculture being key symbols of the dream, it's the heavenly or celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, and the stars. And again, Yosef calls his brothers to attend to the recitation of his dream. Probably not the wisest thing, but he does. But this recitation, Yosef recites in the hearing of his father, Yaakov, or Jacob. Here, the sun, Ha-Shemiz, the moon, Yareah, and 11 stars, Kohavim, are all prostrating, bowing down before him, Mishtahawin, in a sense paying homage to him, submitting to his authority and name, even possibly considered to be worshiping him. Now, Near Eastern traditions contend that it is common for dreams of similar meaning to come to the dreamer in pairs, as is the case of young Yosef here. This dream, however, it takes on a grander scale in terms of its symbolism. The symbolism being a prophetic shadow picture of the exalted Yosef in Egypt, or Mitzrayim, just like his first one. But now we're talking about the celestial bodies. The sun represented Daddy Yaakov, or Jacob. The moon, Mother Rachel, although Rachel is dead at this point in our story chronology, and some have speculated the moon here actually represents Bilhah, who would be Yosef's stepmother. And the 11 stars, of course, symbolize Yosef's brothers. Moving on to verses 10 and 11. Upon hearing the dream, Daddy Yaakov, according to the text, he rebukes, in Hebrew, Gahar. He severely censures Yosef. In this censure, Jacob, questions Yosef as to the meaning of his dream, although the dream's meaning should not have been a mystery to him or anyone else for that matter. And Yaakov, cuts to the heart of the matter here by asking Yosef, "Who in the world do you think you are? Are we all, who are your seniors in more ways than one, meant to submit ourselves to you?" Well, the fallout of Yosef's telling of this second dream as it relates to his brothers is expected. More jealousy. Jealousy being in Hebrew, kaneh. But Yosef's dad, instead of being insulted and angry with Yosef, like Miriam, Yosef's or Yeshua's mother, regarding Yeshua's many acts noted in Luke chapter 2, verse 19 and 51, Luke records that Miriam kept, she guarded, she pondered, shamar. She shamarred Yeshua's words in her mind and in her heart. And so we have here the same type of thing. We have Yaakov, shamar, guarding, pondering the words of his beloved son Yosef in his mind. So Yaakov, on second thought, realizes that just maybe there is something to take note of in Yosef's dream. Beyond the hint of some obnoxiousness inherent in Yosef's character, Moshe does not indicate that Yosef was anything but righteous. And it was Yosef's righteousness that caused his brethren to despise him all the more, according to Tim Hague in his studies in Torah. Yosef's brethren were so blinded by their hatred of him that they could not recognize the divine work being done in their young brother's life. It wouldn't be till they came crawling to Yosef in Egypt as he sat on his throne in Egypt for life-saving sustenance. And only he, Yosef, a type of Messiah, a type of Mashiach, had been granted the power and authority to save Yisrael from total destruction from starvation. Moving on to verses 12 through 14. With Moshe's documentation of Yosef's dreams and the sour relationship our young patriarch has with his brethren, the stage is now set for his exaltation, which will lead to Israel's salvation. But that exaltation will not come without years of trials and tribulations for Yosef. A molding and a refining of this brash favorite one of the Most High. Our coming glorification in Yeshua Messiah, just as with our Master's glorification, that is, we shall see Yehoshua as he presently is and be like him, 1 John chapter 3, verse 2, will not come without the refining fires of trials and tribulations and persecution. And proof of this is found in the Master's Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5. Recall the story of the sons of Zebedee. These approached the Master, requesting of him they be granted the privilege of one of them sitting on his right and the other on his left in the Master's glory. But Yeshua responded to their naive request with a sobering reality check. Matthew chapter 20, verse 22. And the KJV reads, "Ye know not what ye ask." This is Yeshua speaking. "Can ye drink of the cup that I drink of, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" No doubt embarrassed by their master's stark response, but having gone this far with their foolish request, they could not walk it back. So they, of course, declared to the master that they could indeed endure the baptism and drink of the cup that he was destined to drink from. The master did not challenge James's or John's commitment to endure the trials, tribulations, and even martyrdom Yeshua was making reference to, but rather the master prophetically acknowledged to them, "Look, ye shall indeed drink of the cup that I drink of, and with the baptism that I am baptized." Matthew chapter 20, verse 23. And of course, history bears out that James, John, and all the other disciples, taught ones, turned apostles or sent ones, would endure great persecution, trials, and tribulations for the sake of the gospel and the name of Yehoshua HaMashiach. At what will be a most fateful time in Yosef's life, Daddy Jacob, or Yaakov, calls him to go in search of his brethren. Go out to where they were pasturing, where they were grazing the family's flock in Shechem. Check on their well-being and return to him with a report. And Yosef willingly avails himself to embark upon this mission simply by responding to his father with, "Hanene, here I am." It's interesting that the sons of Yaakov would be pasturing the family's flocks in Shechem, given the family's tragic history there. And this is a reference back to Genesis or Bereshit chapter 34, verse 30. And as before, knowing how much mischief his sons routinely got themselves into, well, Yaakov employs his son Yosef to look in on their activities and report back to him. Now, in my mind, it is the inherent dangers associated with the brothers operating in Shechem and their propensity to get into mischief that prompts Daddy Yaakov to send Yosef to check on his son's well-being. The prophetic shadow picture of Jehovah calling upon his beloved son Yeshua to go to his sons, Bnei Yisrael, Bnei Yasharel, in order to bring them back to covenant and in alignment with him is hauntingly but beautifully depicted here in our reading. When the Canaanite woman begs Master Yeshua to deliver her demon-possessed daughter, he responds to the moment by declaring to his taught ones, "I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Yisrael." Matthew chapter 15, verse 24. Abba Yah declared to Yisrael, through Moshe, that he would raise up unto them a prophet, that prophet would be Yeshua. And he would raise Yeshua, that prophet, from their midst, like unto them, that they must hearken. Yehovah, symbolized here in our reading as Jacob or Jacob, would put his words in his prophets, that being here represented by Yosef's mouth. And this prophet, Yeshua, fulfillment of Yosef, shall speak unto the nation Yisrael as his father commands him. See the parallel here? It's beautiful. Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 15 through 18. And like Yosef, Yeshua is instructed to go to his brethren who are pasturing in the dangerous city of Shechem, symbolic of the world. Check on their well-being, their shalom or their davar, and return and report back to him of their situation. Like Yosef before him, Yeshua came to his own who received him not. John chapter 1, verse 11. Describing himself before synagogue attendees in Nazareth one Shabbat, the master recites a portion of Isaiah or Yeshayahu chapter 61, verses 1 and 2. He reads, "The Spirit of Jehovah is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach, the acceptable year of Jehovah." Hallelujah. Luke chapter 4, verses 18 and 19, the KJV rendering. Thus, the shalom, or the davar of Yisrael, is symbolized in Yosef being sent to see to the well-being of the sons of Yisrael and his father's flocks. Remember, Jacob was given the new name Yisrael, Israel. So when you hear me talk about Yisrael, the sons of Yisrael, it's literally his new name. Jacob's new name was Yisrael. So upon preparing to meet his passion and be exalted unto his father, recall that Yeshua reports to Father Yah all that he's accomplished out of obedience to his instructions. And this is all recorded in John chapter 17, verses 1 through 26. This is a partial fulfillment of our prophetically oriented Torah reading here today. It should be noted that Yosef would embark upon a 50-mile journey to Shechem from Hebron. Thus, Jacob sending his beloved son, as did Abba Yah, to Yeshua, such a distance unaccompanied over dangerous territory would be a most risky proposition and task. But Yosef gladly obeys, and he embarks upon this deadly mission. Isn't this exactly what our master did? Praise Yah that Yeshua accepted and successfully completed the mission and task set before him, just as his predecessor Yosef did. Moving on to verses 15 through 17. The text informs us that upon Yosef's arriving in the area of Shechem, the area where it was believed by Daddy Jacob or Daddy Jacob, his brothers were pasturing the family's flocks, the brothers were nowhere to be found. Thus, Yosef is left to wander about searching for them. Yeshua described himself as the Son of Man who came to seek and save those who are lost. Luke chapter 19, verse 10. Beloved, the spiritual and prophetic parallels in our reading are too rich to overlook. Continuing, it is not until a mysterious man, Hebrew Ish, stumbles upon Yosef wandering about the land that Yosef is redirected to the brothers' new grazing location in Dothan, a town about 13 miles northwest of Shechem. We see the persistence of Yosef in his search for the brethren and the family flocks, as instructed by Daddy Yaakov or Daddy Jacob, clearly played out here. Even after completing the no doubt arduous 50-mile trek from his home base in Hebron to Shechem, and then not finding his brother there, the text notes that Yosef wanders about Shechem. How long he wanders is not mentioned in our text, searching for his brethren, and he persists in his search for them until he is pointed to their new location in Dothan. How picturesque is this in terms of our master Yehoshua, who obediently came to Roman-occupied Judah, to seek and to save that which was lost. Indeed, Master Yeshua would not be deterred from his mission, just as his predecessor Yosef would not be deterred from his. So who the mystery or mysterious man was that steered Yosef to his brethren in Dothan is not revealed in our text. But given the necessity, spiritually speaking, for Yosef to find his brethren and then be subject to their assaults and then sold into slavery, it is possible the man was an angel who appears as a man. Certain rabbinic sages identify this mystery man as Gabriel or Gabriel, who is endeared as being the guardian, the malach of Yisrael or Yasharel. And so when it comes to fulfilling his will and plans, Jehovah will use whomever and whatever is available to him to do so. Isaiah chapter 55, verse 9. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than yours, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Moving on to verses 18 through 20. As the brethren see their brother Yosef approach them at their Dothan grazing location, the text states that, quote, they conspired or plotted against him to kill him, end quote, verse 18. Apart from this, where have we come across such rhetoric in Scripture? Matthew 26, verse 4. And consulted that they being the Jerusalem or Yerushalayim religious leaders, that they might take Yehoshua and kill him. Luke chapter 22, verse 2. And the chief priest and scribes sought how they might kill him, him being Yehoshua. John chapter 7, verse 1. The Jews, that being the religious leaders, took counsel to kill him, the him being Yeshua, of course. Before Yosef reaches the brethren, they conspire to destroy him, tempering and justifying their thoughts of him by awarding him the title of Master of Dreams. Recall that as part of their torment of him, Master Yeshua's tormentors musingly referred to him as King of the Jews, verbally, via a placard they placed above him on his execution stake, and in there placing upon his head a crown of thorns. Returning to our reading, the brothers devise a plot to murder Yosef and dispose of his remains by throwing it into one of the pits, Hebrew borot, cisterns that littered the area they were temporarily dwelling in, verse 20. A borot or cistern is a hole that the ancient natives of the land would dig out in either the ground or a rock to capture rain for drinking water. And upon discarding Yosef's remains, the brethren would tell their father Jacob that Yosef was killed and devoured by a wild animal. Now, these are driven not only by their hatred and jealousy for Yosef, but to ensure that Yosef would not achieve the authority and eminence over them that his dreams seem to suggest. They say to one another, quote, then we will see what his dreams become, end quote, verse 20. In other words, let's stop the Yosef train before it's too late. Isn't this what the enemy sought to do regarding Yeshua? The enemy in having Yeshua crucified? Sought to stymie the plans of Jehovah and foil the arrival of the Malkut Elohim, the Elohim, the kingdom of Jehovah, the kingdom of heaven. The brethren's plot would inflict upon Yosef and his memory the greatest indignity, as Yosef's body would be indiscriminately tossed into a pit, hopefully never to be recovered and given a respectable burial. Moving on to verses 21 and 22. Our text then describes Reuben's intervention on Yosef's behalf. Being the oldest of all of Jacob's sons, Reuben's words, his esteem as the oldest son, would stymie, or it would alter, the conceived murder plot leveled at his younger brother. Moshe records two imperatives from Reuben. One, the brethren will not murder Yosef, and two, the brethren will not harm or shed Yosef's blood. But all indications are that Reuben has other plans for Yosef, which, if they come to fruition, might restore his firstborn status in the sight of his father Jacob. Remember, Reuben made the immoral, knuckle-headed error of having a sexual relationship with his father's concubine, Bilhah. That transgression led to his diminished position as his father's eldest son. But we see here in verse 22, Reuben working up a plan to rescue Yosef from the brethren and restore him unharmed to Daddy Jacob. You see, in Reuben's mind, this would certainly bolster his position in the family hierarchy in his daddy's eyes. This is my opinion. Nevertheless, Reuben fulfilled some firstborn responsibilities by stopping the plan of the brethren to destroy Yosef. Verses 23 and 24. So upon Yosef coming into his brother's presence, the first thing they do, well, they strip him of the ornamented robe or tunic his father Yaakov gave him. This technicolor dream coat that Yosef wore serves as a visual trigger to the brethren's jealousy and hatred. This loudly tangible object of Daddy Yaakov's love for Yosef had to first be removed from Yosef. The object of the father's love for his son would become the object of grief for his father, and we'll see that in just a few. Additionally, the robe or tunic provided a degree of dignity to Yosef. Thus, the brethren strip Yosef of his dignity first and foremost. What did our master's tormentors and executioners do? Well, they stripped him of his dignity for all the world to see, to, in effect, discredit him. Moshe, at this juncture in our story, gives us no sign of what Yosef is thinking or feeling. How is he responding to this assault? Moshe doesn't even tell us if Yosef struggles against the actions taken against him by his brothers. That is, not till Genesis or Bereshit chapter 42, verse 21, where Yosef's response to the violent assault is revealed. Then each said to his brother, "Surely we are guilty on account of our brother when we saw the anguish of his soul, when he pleaded for mercy to us, and we would not listen." Verse 25, the coldness, callousness of Yosef's brethren is highlighted by them sitting down to enjoy a meal as their younger brother languishes in a dark, dry cistern. No doubt Yosef was terrified and utterly beside himself. Interestingly, Reuben was not a part of this meal. He's apparently absent. Beyond knowing that his brother Yosef was languishing in the cistern he, along with his brethren, tossed him into, he would not be privy to his brother's plans to entirely rid themselves of Yosef given the chance. So as the brethren eat, they spot an Ishmaelite merchant caravan heading towards Egypt or Mitzrayim. Turns out an ancient trade route ran through Dothan, probably across the fields where their flocks were grazing. Moving to verse 26 and 27, Yehuda, comes up with the idea of once and for all ridding themselves of Yosef, while also making some cash in the process, by selling his brother to the Ishmaelite or Midianite merchants. No muss, no fuss. Clean and efficient. and there would be no blood on their hands, so to speak. Of course, all the brethren agreed to this plan, with the sole exception being Reuben, who is still absent at this juncture of the story. Why is Reuben absent? The text does not say. Could be that he had a falling out with his brethren over what they should do with Yosef, verses 28 through 30. Thus, the brethren, still absent of Reuben, pull Yosef up out of the cistern and hand him over to the merchants, Ishmaelites or Midianites. These were combined tribes of people, and they sold him for 20 pieces of silver. You see, in those days, 2 pieces of silver was the going price for a slave. Little did the brethren realize at this juncture that their respective acts, Reuben stopping the brethren from murdering Yosef, and the remaining brethren agreeing to sell Yosef into slavery, were essentially bringing salvation to Yisrael. These were fulfilling the will, purpose, and plans of the creator of the universe, El Elyon or Al Elyon. Romans chapter 11, verse 33. Oh, the depths of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of Yah. How unsearchable are his judgments and his ways past finding out. Well, Reuben reappears after the brethren sell Yosef to the Egyptian bound merchants, oblivious to what has become of his younger brother. Having checked the pit or cistern and not finding Yosef, Reuben goes sideways, fearing the worst has befallen Yosef. Quote, the boy, Yosef, is gone, Reuben cries. That being, Yosef is no more. He continues, now I, Reuben, bemoans, what can I do? That is, as for me, whither do I go to escape the grief that is sure to grip our father? And Reuben feels responsible for this situation, and he realizes he has feloniously failed in his responsibilities as the firstborn of Yisrael. Verses 31 through 35. Reuben's lament is abruptly cut off by a description of the brethren's cover-up of the situation. These slaughter a goat and dip Yosef's robe or tunic in the slain animal's blood, giving the false impression that Yosef has fallen victim to a wild animal that has tragically took his life. Moshe here does not reveal to us whether the brethren informed Reuben of what they did to Yosef. It seems they kept Reuben in the dark. But for the sake of getting past this tragedy, they all the brethren, participate and perpetuate the cover-up by sending ahead of themselves the tainted garment to their father Yaakov back in Hebron, verse 32. Once the brethren arrive back home, no doubt having solidified their cover-up story among themselves by this time, they ask their father to identify who the blood-soaked tunic or robe might belong to. And playing the role of innocent informants, they ask their father leading questions in order to advance and cement their cover-up in the mind of their father. Verse 33, we found this. Please examine it. Is it the robe of your son or not? Of course, these all knew their father would identify the tainted robe as belonging to Yosef. The robe, haketonet, the robe of my son. A wild animal has devoured him. Yosef is surely torn to pieces. Beyond asking their father to identify the owner of the ornamented robe, the brethren need to not risk incriminating themselves in this heinous cover-up any further. For their father, Yaakov, puts the pieces to this contrived crime together in his own mind and his own utterances of extreme grief. And as common among the ancient Semites in these days, upon learning of a tragedy such as the death of a loved one, Yaakov rents the very clothes he is wearing, adorns sackcloth about his hips or loins, and engages in several days of mourning over the loss of his beloved son, verse 34. Yaakov is inconsolable, so much so that he declares he will accompany his son Yosef in death, verse 35. No doubt the patriarch felt responsible for Yosef's presumed death, having sent him out in search of his brethren and the flocks alone, out into the dangerous lands. In verse 36, and immediately Moshe shifts over to Yosef's real-time situation. The Midianites sell Yosef to an Egyptian by the name of Potiphar. Potiphar meaning the gift of Ra, whom the text describes as a court official of Pharaoh and a commander of the guard, that being the chief of the executioners. Let's look at some spiritual applications and some closing thoughts and reflections. On the subject of dreams and Hebrew dreamers, Fruchtenbaum, in his commentary on Genesis, notes that Yah frequently spoke to his people through dreams, as mentioned in Numbers chapter 12, verse 6. And he, Yah, said, "Hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I, Jehovah, will speak unto him in a dream." Indeed, in a broad sense here, Yosef would be a prophet. And because Jehovah is often revealing to his dreamers his will and plans, within Hebrew society there would be no need for an interpreter of said dreams, such as the case here in our reading. Secondly, Yah employs Hebrews to interpret the dreams of non-Hebrews, as noted in various historic scriptural passages such as Yosef to the Egyptian and Daniel to Babylonian officials and rulers. And thirdly, Yah, through various means, including dreams, reveals himself, his will, and his plans to his people, who are then meant to reveal those received revelations to the world. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1, Jehovah, who at sundry times and in divers manners, including dreams, spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets. Romans chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. What advantage then hath the Jew? Much every way, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of Yah. Then we have this prophetic passage, the content of which is clearly linked to the reading before us today. Revelation chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Verse 2. And she being with child cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. This is a fulfillment of the prophetic shadow that is depicted here in Yosef's second dream. But the revelation symbolism here is distilled down to the woman being Yisrael, as the nation is often depicted as Jehovah's wife. Now, our Torah reading provides us with a rich Messianic prophetic shadow picture. Virtually every aspect of the Yosef story is depicted in our reading is reflective of the person and ministry of Yeshua Messiah. Like Yosef, Yehoshua was beloved by his father Jehovah. Matthew chapter 3 verse 17 and Matthew chapter 17 verse 5. Like Jacob did to Yosef, Jehovah appointed Yeshua to shepherd Yisrael. Mark chapter 6 verse 34. Yosef was destined to become royalty. Yeshua was and remains as royalty. And there's coming a day, beloved, as occurred when Yosef ruled in Egypt, when every knee will bow and every tongue confess that he, Yeshua, is master to the glory of Jehovah. Philippians chapter 2, verses 10 and 11. As Yosef eventually ruled over his brethren from his throne in Egypt, eventually Judah will receive Yeshua as her Messiah, her Mashiach. Zechariah chapter 12. Yehoshua's brethren despised him for the words he spoke, the words that came not from him alone, but from his heavenly Father. Nevertheless, like Yosef experience whereby his brothers rejected him and sought to rid themselves of him, Yeshua's brethren also rejected him. John chapter 11. Like his predecessor Yosef, Yeshua would be killed by his brethren, the very ones he was sent to redeem and minister to. Luke chapter 19, verse 10. He was thrown into Sheol, the grave, just like the cistern that Yosef was thrown into by his brethren. But in the end, he, like Yosef, was raised from the death and would be exalted on high by Jehovah Sabaoth. Psalm chapter 110. Often that which man tends for evil, Yah uses for good. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. In the case of Yosef, his brethren intended to rid themselves of him. But Yah exalted Yosef to the throne of Egypt, and Yisrael's would be saved from the devastating famine. In the case of Yeshua, the enemy attempted to stymie the will and plans of Yah by crucifying him. But Yah's plan of salvation, redemption, and restoration was gloriously worked through the evil actions of the enemy. Praise Yah. The gospel of the kingdom is played out in grandeur in our Torah reading today. Jehovah knows the end from the beginning, Isaiah 46 verse 10. Thus, Torah readings such as the one we studied here today are indeed shadows of good things to come, Hebrews 10:1. Oh, there are many other messianic reflections to be had from this reading, and I pray that you were blessed and edified as I have been by what we've covered and discussed today. And so we'll bring this discussion to a close. Until next time, beloved, and as always, I bid you Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov, take care.